All right, it looks like we're live. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Directors and our EDC team, we want to welcome you all to Warren County's discussion with our local Congresswoman, Elise Stefanik. As many of you know, throughout her time in office, which we are happy to report continues with her recent reelection, Elise has been a really strong proponent of our economic initiatives in Warren County and the entire district. And we can't thank her enough for being here with us this morning. I'll now turn it over to our interim president, Jim Siplun, for introductions and a great question and answer format on economic issues facing Warren County. Jim.
Thanks, Matt. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to see you, even though it's early in the morning, and we certainly appreciate the Congresswoman taking time from what is clearly a last-minute dash at the end of the year here to get so much done. I'm sure we all know a fair amount about Congresswoman Stefanik, but let me make sure that we cover the high points. As Matt said, she just was elected to her fourth term. She carried nearly 60% of the vote. That's a powerful mandate. She's been a member of the powerful Armed Services Committee, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the Committee on Education and Labor. Of course, we all know that she was born and raised here. She's worked in her family's small business here. She's been a distinguished champion for our region, for our military, our veterans, our families, farmers, certainly health and education facilities, the hospital in particular, small communities at large. She was not only the youngest Republican woman ever elected to Congress in U.S. history, but this year, I know many of you know, she led the effort to elect Republican women to Congress. And a record 35 Republican women were successfully elected, breaking the previous record of 30, a sharp increase. And we can owe so much of this and so much more to the strong representation that we have with Representative Stefanik. We're so proud to have her here, and we certainly want to welcome her. Would love to have you share any comments you'd like, Elise, before we break into some questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you so much to the Warren County Economic Development Council for your tremendous for all that you do. Am I coming in okay here? Okay, good. I am coming to you at this call from Washington. As Jim and Matt mentioned, we are in session this week. We will likely be in session part of next week as well, because we have a lot to get done. And this has been a very unprecedented year. We have worked to deliver the needed resources, and there's more work to do for small businesses, families, and many of our institutions across the North Country. I am grateful for the opportunity to continue serving New York's 21st Congressional District, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you, but also the state elected officials. Later this week, I'll be delivering floor remarks honoring Senator Betty Little's just decades of service to our region. I look forward to working with Dan Steck and Matt Simpson. I was on a call with them yesterday with the Adirondack Associations of Towns and Villages. So we really have a strong working relationship, not only at the federal and state level, but with the county and town level, which has been so important throughout this pandemic. We are working to provide the needed relief. And I know for the business folks on this call, that's some of the issues that Jim is going to highlight. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jim, so we can go right into the questions.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our focus, I know you're going to talk with some more in our community tomorrow and later in the week. I spoke with Chamber President Mike Biddle, and what we agreed to do was to really focus on what we see as the strategic issues facing the business community here in our session. There may be some overlap, and that's okay, but many of the tactical day-to-day issues will probably be more focused in the conversations you would have with the Chamber. So with that in mind, the thing that's probably dominated our life for the past year has been the coronavirus. And there's a couple of things that are timely here. White House Coordinator Dr. Birx has warned recently that the escalating surge is worrying and may be the most trying event in U.S. history, she says. Hospital systems around the country are straining to combat it. She says this is not just the worst public health event, it's the worst event this country will face. I mean, that's pretty strong language, and I want to know how you see this, Elise. How do you agree with this assessment? Do you think we're ready? How can we in our district best prepare?
Sure. So I stay closely in contact with our county officials and, of course, the county public health officials at each of the counties across this district. We have seen an increase in cases. Our numbers, when compared to hotspots around the state and around the country, still remain relatively low, but that doesn't mean we have to continue to be vigilant and continue to put forth the best and follow the best public health guidance. I think that our hospitals and community health centers are well prepared. They did just a tremendous job, all of them, from Glens Falls Hospital to Hudson Headwaters to hospitals across the district, Saratoga Hospital. Many of them have expanded their telehealth services, which that has been a real lesson throughout this crisis, is that there's an opportunity to make some of those telehealth changes and benefits permanent so that people who want to pursue their healthcare access that way are able to do so. It was clear this year that our hospitals and community health centers needed significant funds. And that was a real focus of my work in the previous CARES package, was making sure that our hospitals and health centers qualified. And in the cases when they didn't qualify, work to get them qualified for that CARES aid. So I've been able to deliver over $150 million directly to hospitals in our district, with a particular focus on the challenges at Glens Falls Hospital. In addition, Hudson Headwaters, we just announced an additional round of funding of over $1 million to Hudson Headwaters. That's on top of millions beforehand. But that's been extremely important because as hospitals face significant financial crisis, they ran the risk of having to lay off permanently their healthcare workers. That is not what we need at this very challenging time. We need every single healthcare worker to be able to go to their work and serve the community in an amazing way. I also think it's important to note, while we faced a surge this spring, Operation Warp Speed, which is the vaccination development program, the public-private partnership that we put in over $1 billion of funds through the federal government, that will be the fastest vaccination development in human history of this scale. My focus is ensuring that the vaccine distribution, which is just around the corner, we're very close at the precipice, it's focused not just on urban centers, but on rural centers as well, making sure that we get access to the vaccines in the North Country to make sure our healthcare workers, our nursing home officials, our nursing home patients, those who are most vulnerable, and then the general public are able to get access to the vaccine. So, I appreciate the service of Dr. Birx and other public health officials. I'm focused on providing the needed relief as we're facing this challenging time.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. You raised two interesting points, and one I'd like to follow up on is obviously there's a fair amount in the news in the last 24 hours about the vaccine deployment in other parts of the world. What do you anticipate in terms of the timing for the vaccine to be available here in the North Country, first for the first wave, as you say, of healthcare workers and those most at risk, and then the general public, particularly the business public, as many firms are trying to figure out how to plan for the coming year?
The short answer is as quickly as possible, but I anticipate in the very early part of 2021. And we are going to work to make that as seamless and quickly as possible. As you recall, the initial challenges of testing supplies, we had to work very hard to make sure that the North Country had access to the testing capacity and testing capabilities. I think we learned a lot from that distribution effort, what worked, what didn't work. We also learned a lot from the PPE challenges that we faced early on. And now we have a strong distribution network, and those lessons will be learned as we work through the vaccination development. But there needs to be a strategic plan. At the state level, we need to make sure that the state prioritizes rural counties. That was an issue with some of the testing capacity as they focus primarily on downstate, and we really had to fight to get access for the upstate towns, municipalities, and hospitals.
We certainly want to thank you for your leadership here in the past year. Particularly your advocacy for our healthcare institutions has been critical for our region. We have direct connection into both the hospital and Hudson Headwaters, and we staved off, what could have been a terrible situation for both. And now both are looking to both be responsive to the pandemic and also potentially grow in their ability to meet the needs. And I think a lot of their current posture is thanks to some of the diligent work you did. So thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to pivot maybe now to the stimulus. You know that you're in, you know better than anyone because you're in the maelstrom there. There's a stimulus bill that's being considered right now. We're hopeful that it will come out by year's end. What do you expect? What do you think it will include? What can you share with us about how that may affect things like state and local government, our community college, any small business relief? What can you share with us?
Well, I can give an update. This is the top issue as well as the government funding that we are trying to get done as quickly as possible. From my perspective, this should have been done, and I pushed to get this done much earlier this year. And the American people and people across the North Country have been anxiously waiting for this bipartisan. It was frustrating to me because the first three packages that were CARES 1, CARES 2, CARES 3, really, both the stimulus side and the funding for the vaccine, those were almost unanimous votes, and they were critical. We moved them quickly, and that needed support, was able to get to the communities. We need to get this done, and we have had breakthroughs this past week of both the White House, the Republican Senate, and the Democratic-led House coming together to make sure that we can deliver for the American people. Here are the provisions that I'm fighting for. So number one, small businesses. Obviously in our district, when you look at the economic driver, small businesses on Main Street are critical. Additional eligibility and rounds of Paycheck Protection Program are critically important, but we also need to fix what's not working in the PPP. Both the loan forgiveness provisions, that is not streamlined and it's very complicated. I'm working with small businesses who we urge them to take out the Paycheck Protection Program, but now the paperwork that they have to fill out was not according to congressional intent. We want to make loans under $150,000, which are truly for small businesses, and have a much easier forgiveness process. In addition, I want businesses, again, according to congressional intent, to maintain their deductions as they file their taxes. Secretary Mnuchin at the Department of Treasury did not follow congressional intent. And I know it's been a huge frustration to the business community that he has said you can no longer deduct those expenses that you used with the Paycheck Protection Program. We are in Congress, we write the laws. That was intended to be a grant / a long-term loan. It shouldn't have increased taxes on businesses. So that is a provision we are fighting for. There is bipartisan support for that. I've been in a number of discussions on the importance of that, but that's particularly important for small businesses. Not only is it important for tax purposes, but frankly, many small businesses feel like the rug has been pulled out from under them. In addition, stages and theaters, I know that sounds like a minor issue, but it's so important to the cultural institutions and the kind of cultural character of the North Country. We're working on the Save Our Stages Act that we're trying to get included in the bill, because while they are not, some of them are small businesses, but some of them are nonprofits, they have been hit particularly hard because they can't host the large events. In addition, state and local aid. We're working with the Association of Counties as well as the towns and villages across the district. We want to make sure that rural counties qualify. One way you can do that is having a calculation based 2/3 off of population, 1/3 off of revenue loss. That is a way it's calculated that would benefit upstate counties. In addition, K-12 education. While the CARES Act did provide over $1 billion for K-12 schools, the state, with their fiscal challenges, has not pushed that out to the school districts. I want to see direct aid to the school districts directly that don't have to flow through the state, so that our superintendents and our principals can make the best decisions for this just tremendous work that they have done, whether it's PPE for their teachers and staff, and all the challenges that they face. And lastly, funding for vaccine distribution. So there's a lot that needs to get done. Those are the key provisions that I'm advocating for. And of course, there's other issues as well, but those are the key themes. But the business certainty is really, really important, as well as the certainty for the counties and local governments. I am optimistic we will get it done. It will probably be attached to the funding bill. The appropriations expires on December 11th. We're likely to pass a 1-week stopgap measure and then a final appropriations package. December is always like this. It is unfortunate, but this is when the sausage really gets made and gets done. And I'm confident we'll be able to deliver the needed results. And that's what I'm focused on.
Well, thank you for that. That was a very thorough rundown. In the past, you've used conduits like the Lake Champlain Planning Board to help shepherd these funds. Do you see similar pathways? How do you see the money coming into the district?
It depends on the kind of scope of the package, but there are similar pathways. You know, the Lake Champlain board, that has been a helpful way to have an influx of funds. That's through the Department of Commerce. And the CARES package was so big that there were kind of multiple vectors. You had the direct vector of the SBA loans, but then you had the economic development funds. I anticipate we will be working with organizations like that moving forward, as well as our EDCs across the district and our IDAs.
Well, you know that we stand by ready to play our role in bringing this critical support to the district. And again, we're really honored to have you lead the way that you have. It's when we compare ourselves to many of our peer organizations across the state and in other states, we're in a very different place. And your advocacy is a big part of that. Thank you. Another big topic is the fact that, you know, there's a transition going on in Washington, and we're wondering about how you feel your ability to work not only with the Trump administration, but potentially another administration. You know, for instance, what you did with Glens Falls Hospital was spectacular and sometimes against the current of what was being proposed. Do you anticipate being able to work that same way as we move forward?
Absolutely. You know, people forget I've served in Congress under two administrations, both President Obama and President Trump. And I've been able to deliver results in both circumstances, in divided government, both with a Republican president and a Democratic president, but also with, you know, a different leadership in the House, a democratically led House and a Republican led House. So I've been able and had the opportunity to serve in all sorts of kind of political combinations. My focus, and I think we've really developed this strength in my office, is working with the federal agencies. I've learned a lot since my first term. I'm now going into my fourth term, and being able to leverage communication directly with the federal agencies has been key. And that's going to be a priority for me, especially with the incoming Secretary of HHS, is ensuring that they understand the importance of rural communities across the country and the needs specifically of New York's 21st district. So I will remain focused on that. And I actually think we're going to get a lot done before the end of this year in terms of both the additional CARES package, but I anticipate and I'm going to work to make sure that I can deliver those results over the next 2 years.
It's wonderful news. You know, you help us segue to two really important topics that, while I think they're national topics, are particularly important to your very far-flung district. You know better than anyone that your district is one of the largest in terms of area, most expansive in terms of geography, all kinds of challenges there. And two major issues that we're working on strategically, not only for Warren County, but oftentimes across the entire region, which encompasses much or all of your district, are broadband and infrastructure at large. I'd kind of like to take them one at a time. Broadband, oftentimes people have told me that the pandemic accelerated problems or issues that were already present. And I think that's definitely true of broadband. I think we all knew broadband was important. But when the pandemic came, we became acutely aware of any place where it wasn't, because kids couldn't go to school. People could not get the health care they needed as it was increasingly remotely delivered. It became a matter of life and death, to be honest. And we've now been confronting just where we are in terms of our true broadband coverage and cell coverage. And you have one of the most challenging districts in America, you know, for those issues. Here at the EDC, we've taken it on as probably our single largest issue, not because we wanted to, but because we clearly see it as fundamental to business growth and to communities that are healthy as we enter into the next chapter here. So with all that in mind, and all the work that's already going on, how can we best structure ourselves to help bring the right funds, the right programs, align ourselves to get the best possible coverage we can in your district?
This issue is critical. I'm so glad that the EDC is focused on this. This pandemic has highlighted this just basic need for access and making it equitable access for rural communities. I know as I drive around the district, it's both rural broadband, but also cell coverage. And we need to make sure that whether you're from Newcomb or you're from Queensbury, that you have equal opportunity as a small business and as kids in school. As I've talked to some of the superintendents and principals, I have school districts where over 50% of the students do not have access to rural broadband and completely fell off the map, essentially, and were not able to have their education this past spring. We have to do better. It's a partnership at the federal, state, and local level. Here are the steps I've taken and I have taken at the federal level. So number one, in the Farm Bill, and I know this is a roundabout way of getting at it, but the Farm Bill focuses a lot on rural America. In the 2018 Farm Bill, I was able to secure provisions that prioritize rural broadband grants and loans for projects in rural areas. Many of our farms on the last mile have pursued that in the district. In addition, the FCC and Chairman Pai. Initially, New York was not going to qualify for the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund Phase 1 auction. I led the effort and we partnered with Antonio Delgado. So this was a bipartisan effort from rural districts in upstate New York, making sure that we would qualify for that funding. And as of today, New York has been assigned $99 million in funding over the next 10 years to be distributed and built out in high-speed internet access in over 46,000 locations in rural areas of the state. And we need to make sure that New York 21 is prioritized. We are the most rural part and the most challenging, I would say, geography in the state. 99.7% of these locations will be receiving broadband with gigabit speed. So it's important. We don't want to just say we have an area covered when it's lower speeds. We need to make sure that it's high speed internet and that it's affordable. In addition, the mapping issue. So the FCC mapping is, from my perspective, not reflective of reality and out of date. The Broadband Data Act, we need to get that signed into law as quickly as possible. That allows us to improve the accuracy of FCC mapping. In addition, we're going to continue working on legislation I proposed, the Broadband for All Act. And then I'll also be working on the grants. This is another area you talked about the different kind of vectors, whether it was the regional planning boards, in this case, the Northern Border Regional Commission, which is a pot of grant funding that I actually worked to make eligible for all 12 counties in my district. Initially, it was just the northern borders contiguous to the border. We've been able to deliver localized grant funds for rural broadband through the NBRC. So I'll continue to do that. This is a top issue, and it's one of the top economic issues I think we face in the district.
Well, again, your breadth of awareness about it is so helpful for us, and what we're trying to do is position ourselves to be a conduit to bring that to the field here for the EDC, but not just for Warren County. Increasingly, we're finding that smaller counties, say like Hamilton County or Essex County, we can partner with them and use some of the relative information we have and connections that we have to try to bring about regional solutions. Do you see that as the wave of the future to try to make the efforts as regional as possible in your district?
Absolutely. And, frankly, our district, it's a regional district. So the Adirondacks in the district, they face many of the same challenges, whether you're even in northern Saratoga County or in Hamilton County. So there's a real opportunity to work, whether it's through the AATV, whether it's through these county by county partnerships. And we want to be a part of those discussions. And I would also suggest the state level officials need to be a strong part of those discussions as well, because while we allocate those funds to the state, we need to make sure that there's recognition that the most unserved part of the state when it comes to broadband infrastructure tend to be the most rural parts of the state, which are in the North Country. So absolutely, we want to work. And I think that model of partnering at the county level is a strong one.
Well, you mentioned both Dan Steck and Matt Simpson earlier, and we have strong relationships, thankfully, with both of them. But I think the great benefit for our region is how deep they are in these issues. Dan has dealt with them for many years, and Matt, with his work with the Association of Towns and all of their knowledge together with your knowledge bodes well for us. So we're eager to get to work with you here to make this situation even better. A similar issue is around infrastructure. Of course, infrastructure is an ongoing challenge. You know, everybody talks about infrastructure. It's been going on all my adult life, but there are clearly places where infrastructure is literally the difference between whether a community is connecting to the next chapter of the economy or not. And I think particularly around water and wastewater, we're seeing this. There are parts of our area that we serve where they still do not have any public water or wastewater, and it is an impediment to any kind of rational development that would diversify the tax base, help the place grow in the ways that it wants to grow. In cases like this, and certainly with small property tax basis, you're going to need some kind of support from government. What can you tell us on what's on the horizon in terms of support for small rural communities as they're challenged with these issues?
Well, first, it's been a priority since I've taken office, and we do face unique infrastructure challenges, not only being a rural community, but having aged infrastructure. So if you look at the wastewater treatment facilities or the sewers in our district or their water pipelines, they are aging out. And many of our towns and villages and counties, they're in challenging economic situations and are not able to make those investments alone. So we've prioritized finding creative ways to deliver funds. I want to go back to the Northern Border Regional Commission. I know it's one funding pot, but it's flexible to be eligible for the wastewater treatment facility in Lake George, for example. That was something that we worked really hard to deliver. And if you talk to Mayor Blaze, that was his top priority the year we were able to provide the federal funds through NBRC to augment local funding and state funding. That was critical. In addition, the previous CARES Act have included transportation infrastructure grants. Glens Falls qualified for 3.5 million FTA grant funding for infrastructure, and I anticipate that there will be additional infrastructure funds in this stimulus package that we're negotiating. Also funding for the IDAs, Warren Washington County IDA, we were able to deliver $600,000 through the Northern Border Regional Commission, but we are in need of a broader infrastructure bill with a specific focus on rural America. Typically those are very bipartisan, and I'm hopeful that next year that will be a priority. This is very much tied to rural broadband. I don't like thinking of them as separate. They are one and the same, and any infrastructure bill needs to include rural broadband. The other aspect of this that's important to a district like mine is even infrastructure funding for public transit systems downstate like the MTA. That's very much tied to the economy and jobs, specifically manufacturing jobs in my district. Because if you go up to Plattsburgh, I represent a transportation parts and a transportation manufacturing hub. We make many of the transportation parts, as well as the buses and trains that go to those public transit systems across the country. So you'll see me on letters advocating for the MTA. That's why. It's because it's very much tied to our district where we make those things and where we employ good paying jobs.
Well, thank you for that. You touched on a couple of things that I want to make sure you know a little bit about some of what the work that we're trying to help champion. In some parts of Warren County, particularly in the North Creek-Johnsburg corridor, there's a need for water and wastewater. We're trying to help them develop a strategy for that. That area of the county is only going to develop if we're able to try to overcome this challenge. And of course, you know, there's only a few hundred people there, so we've got to figure out a funding mechanism that would work for a community like that. And across the larger parts of the county, we're trying to consolidate at the county level all the capital projects so that they're best positioned to take advantage of some of the funding sources that you talked about. We'll clearly continue to try to work with your office to do that. Looks like we're going to lose you, Matt. Thank you. I wanted to make sure you know that for us, broadband and infrastructure are the two largest areas that we're working strategically on behalf of not only the business community, but the area at large. So we will continue to try to partner with you every way we can. Jacob has been wonderful in your office, by the way, in partnering with us so far. So we're really looking forward to doing more there. I wouldn't mind pivoting now to healthcare. Another enormous part of our regional economy is healthcare, and to maybe a cousin to that is the medical device industry, which feeds the healthcare industry. But healthcare providers in the North Country are under enormous stress for many of the reasons that you talked about earlier. One of the challenges we face here in an aging district is that we have not the right demography for all the funding to be able to work for us in the way that, if we just get down to the way Medicaid funding works, for instance, it's a significant challenge. What is there that can be done that would help us address these things that we haven't already talked about?
Sure. So this was very acute this year, especially. I mean, issues as detailed as how many miles Glens Falls was away from Saratoga Hospital. That didn't make them eligible for certain ways of calculating reimbursements and funds, and being considered a sole community hospital, for example. That's arbitrary in many ways because we know Glens Falls Hospital serves a very unique constituency, and many of those people travel from the north south. They're driving south down the Northway to access Glens Falls Hospital. I really worked to talk to each hospital directly as to what their needs are, and when they were left out of funds in the CARES package, go to work on their behalf and make their case. We're working to make sure that when there are permanent changes that can be made to how funded and how these calculations are made, we're trying to work to deliver that. But in the interim, I want to make sure that every hospital and health organization qualifies for the next round of funds in the CARES Act. And they take into consideration the high percentage of seniors that we serve. If you look at our payer mix at hospitals, both of Medicare and Medicaid, versus private insurance, we do have many seniors and elderly in our district, and we need to take that into consideration to make sure hospitals get the funds they need. In addition, Hudson Headwaters has really been a model, frankly, for federally qualified health centers across the country. John Ruggie has been a visionary, and we work very closely with them to make sure that even pre-COVID, FQHCs, so the federally qualified health centers in rural communities, that they didn't face a funding cliff and they could have 5 years of sustainable, certain funding and continue to do their work. That has been so important during this COVID crisis. So making sure that rural hospitals and the unique challenges that they face are taken into consideration on any healthcare reform, but specifically for COVID, as we talk about federal dollars and deliver those federal dollars, making sure they're not just going to the urban centers, but the rural hospitals as well, particularly who they all did a pause on elective surgeries. Their revenue was hit extraordinarily hard, even though they didn't face the surge that New York City hospitals did. They accepted many positive COVID patients outside of the region in the spring of this crisis, and I anticipate they're working to do so again as we face higher numbers. So it's been a really close partnership with each of the hospital CEOs and teams across the district, and that's my commitment to continue doing that.
Thank you for that. There's been a number of questions that have come from our constituency that are related to this. One of them just in general is just, it tends to be more about the fact that there's concern about the healthcare workforce as they come out of the pandemic. I know this is not unique to us. In fact, it may be even worse in many other parts of the country. Is this any part of the dialogue that's going on around future funding around CARES Act as to how we may be able to help that very taxed and remarkable workforce?
Absolutely. And I've had the opportunity to visit with our docs, nurses, and healthcare workers, physicians assistants across the district in person. And you can hear, you can see how physically, mentally, emotionally, and psychologically taxing this past year has been, not only on them, but on their families as well. They have worked tirelessly. They have served this community so ably, and it is a part of our discussions. There's discussions of hazard pay. But I also think what's really important is making sure that the hospitals themselves have the funding that they need to pay those healthcare workers and not have any, layoffs, any people that have uncertain schedules or a rollback of the hours that they're working We need that certainty. And I think the way we provide that financial stability is making sure that the hospitals and health centers are in strong financial positions to pay their workforce during this challenging time. But I also think there are additional avenues, and hazard pay is one way that we could look at it for just the tremendous work that they've done this past year.
Well, thank you for that. And, I think all of us know that they've been carrying just an enormous load in the past year. So any attention there is certainly warranted and helpful. I would touch just a minute ago on the medical device industry. And, it functions as an extension, obviously, of a healthy healthcare sector. We have a disproportionate amount of that type of industry here. Are there anything that you can share with us about the support for the medical device industry at large that would give us more information or some glimpse into the future?
Yes, and you asked this before and I didn't answer it. I answered about hospitals, so thank you for bringing it back up. Medical device industry is critical to our region, known as Catheter Valley. We manufacture a huge amount of medical devices locally. I've had the opportunity to tour many of those businesses and work closely. One of my priorities when I first took office was repealing the medical device tax. That was a job killer in our region, and it impacted the medical device companies locally from being able to grow and invest more in their workforce. So we have eliminated that. That was successful. We do not want to see that come back. So I will be fighting against any type of medical device tax, which could be used as a pay for, whatever plans the next administration has. So we cannot tax our manufacturers. They have been critical. They're a critical part of the supply chain, and they're an important economic driver in our region. That has been their top issue. Workforce development is also a key issue for the medical device manufacturers, and we're going to continue working with SUNY Adirondack, with local BOCES programs to make sure that we have the workforce and the pipeline for these medical device companies in our region.
Thank you. Those are great answers that will help so many here. One of the things that's come out of the pandemic is just the awareness, for instance, at the beginning of the PPE challenges that we all faced as a country. Has there been any discussion about building strategic capacity post this that could potentially not only benefit all of us, but particularly since we have so much capacity in that particular space with the medical device industry?
Absolutely. We need a strategic reserve of masks, of gloves, of gowns. Over the course of this, it was very eye-opening and a lesson, I think, for all of us, as I would hear directly from the hospitals and the county public health officials how much we were in need of all of those PPE, as well as the testing capacity and testing capabilities. Many of our local businesses stepped up in big ways. Whether it was small organizations sewing masks that are not medical grade but are still used by the public, and that's important, or manufacturing of hand sanitizer. Local distilleries in Warren County who pivoted to do that and have really sent out an unbelievable tonnage of hand sanitizer. I think there are a few ways that from a public policy perspective we can get at this. Maintaining the strategic reserves is one, but we cannot be reliant upon foreign manufacturing. We need to make sure that we have domestic capabilities here in the US or within North America. We can partner with our Canadian partners. Reliant upon China. If you look at the number of masks, the H1 that we would bring in, or the gown manufacturing, so much of that happens overseas. We need to bring that back. And that's a national security issue. We're working on that as part of the China task force, which I was a member of. That was one of the recommendations. Another recommendation beyond PPE is am I back? Did I lose you guys?
Yeah, but you're back and we're so happy.
Sorry, did I get up to the making it in China? We need to bring it back to the US?
Yes.
Okay. In addition to PPE, many of our pharmaceutical drugs and our life-saving drugs, or even medicines as basic as ibuprofen, that is also, much of it is manufactured in China. That needs to also come back to North America and the US. So there are a number of bipartisan bills to do that, but this is highlighted local American domestic manufacturing.
Well, thank you for that. I want to make sure you know that there are several things that we're at least exploring here locally, and we would love to team with your staff as we work through these. One is figuring out how the region can best serve the strategic things that you've been talking about in terms of capacity going forward. Some of our facilities, perhaps in terms of being ready to be able to step into that void and helping figure out from a public standpoint how we can help them be ready to do that. I think another thing is just continue to encourage the entrepreneurial culture that comes from all of that intellectual capacity. We've talked about trying to create a small medical device startup hub here regionally, and that may be something that we come to talk to you about. But you certainly have your finger on the pulse of how important this is and also what an asset this is for us to have that. And so we're heartened to hear that. I want to pivot now to another really big part of our local economy, which is tourism. And when I stepped into this job, tourism was almost thought of as kind of its own economic engine. But as we went through the pandemic, one of the things that we discovered is how fragile it was, but also how important it was to this region. When we were facing a summer with no tourism, the public got together with the private sector to try to figure out how we could best optimize around what was possible. And I think it's fair to say that this particular region did better in terms of finding that middle path of developing a safe way for people to get away and recreate, but also to continue to support that sector of the economy. So that, for instance, in the Lake George region, they had the best July and August that they've ever had. Of course, they lost 2 months before that, but that speaks to the resilience of this sector and also to how important it is to all of us that we rallied around it. But one huge issue that we continue to face is trying to understand how we're going to meet those seasonal workforce needs. And the J1 workers, which we typically have thousands of, were absent from our region this year, and something that both structurally we miss, but also culturally we miss. In many ways, this was some of the biggest opportunities for diversity and exposure that we have in this area. What can you share with us about the J1 program?
Sure. The J1 program is so critical to our tourist economy, not just in Lake George, but really all across my district. If you think of Old Forge and Water Safari, if you think of Lake Placid, this is an issue for the hotels in Lake Placid. And of course, Lake George, Great Escape, other employers that are really, the heartbeat of our summer economy and our tourist-based economy. We need to make sure that we raise the cap for J1 workers and H2B workers. That has been a top issue that we've worked with the Lake George Chamber of Commerce on. And it's something that I anticipate going into the next administration, we will be able to raise that cap and have that dependable workforce. I have been one of the leading voices of the importance of both the J1 and H2B visa programs for our economy. And I've been on all the letters and advocacy calls to the administration on this issue. And it's something we're going to continue working towards because that certainty is really important for our employers this past year. I was glad to hear, separate from the visa programs, that economies like Lake George economy in July and August did have a very strong end of summer. The same goes for the Thousand Islands in another part of my district. I was on a call with them last week, and they also said they had just a booming July and August as well. And it does highlight the overall resiliency. And it's an opportunity, as people maybe are limiting their travel on airplanes, for example, we have so much to take advantage of, not that far away in a car ride in our district. And I'm glad that people are really taking advantage and really learning more about their own community that's not as far away and staying in New York rather than going to other states.
Wanted to share, thank you for that. And I wanted to share with you a couple of things that we're working on that we may continue to seek your input and support on. One is obviously the J1 challenge highlights a seasonal nature of the workforce. And in order for us to structurally address that over time, the development of a more year-round tourism economy is what you would consider to be an imperative, so that we can keep people employed year-round and we can reduce our dependence on a program like that in order for all these entities to be healthy. But obviously that's a generational shift. If people are used to only coming here 6 months out of the year, and we're trying to encourage and develop their ability to come here year round, it will take years for us to be able to do that. So we're trying to figure out the ways to invest in that. A lot of that is just understanding data and patterns. But one thing that has come up is that this place was perceived to be one of the safest places in America. We were able to highlight enormous inflows of visitors and yet maintain a very safe posture in terms of community spread of the disease. And I believe that there's an awareness that that is a strategic asset that we would want to continue. For instance, our ability to continue to monitor through things like wastewater testing, community spread of not only COVID, but potentially any pathogen, and be able to give people confidence that we track and measure that would be an asset that would help keep us at the forefront of what's considered to be a safe destination. So these are all areas that we're exploring from an EDC standpoint, and we may seek your help and your staff's help as we try to explore what options are available.
I think they're great areas to explore and put forth proposals on the wastewater monitoring program. Some of the colleges and universities have partnered and are doing that program. Both Clarkson and SUNY Plattsburgh have worked on that, and I know they're sharing it with other college campuses. And I think those programs you can model something after them in other regions, off campus and in the broader community. But I think it's a huge opportunity, particularly when you're talking about a year-round tourist season and year-round being a destination. We do have so much to offer in the winter, from the local ski mountains, whether it's West Mountain, Willard Mountain, or up in the Whiteface region. You have so many opportunities, as well as Lake Placid. One of the successful ways that different communities have been able to draw people in the winter time is you have Winter Carnival in Saranac Lake. Lake George has lots of winter activities. So I think we can continue to grow and build on that.
Well, thank you. I mean, you grew up in the hospitality industry, so you have an innate understanding of this, and that's, again, a huge advantage for us. We're kind of coming towards the end. There is an important sector of our the economy that we try to support that we've touched on maybe tangentially, but I would like you to give an opportunity to talk about it at large, which is just the manufacturing arena in general. We have some promising young manufacturers, and of course, you and I met each other because I helped build one here, in Just Water. And the idea of how can we find a way to support not only the long-standing industry we have, like the paper industry and the medical device industry, but new and emerging opportunities in manufacturing, and just your outlook for manufacturing at large, particularly as we look at some of the geopolitical issues with trade balance in China. And I'd love for you to just talk for a minute about what you see here.
I think the outlook for manufacturing at large is bright. I think it's been a seismic shift over not just the past year, but the past few years. We in the North Country invest in our manufacturers. They are good paying, certain reliable jobs locally, and the professional growth opportunities for people in our community. I think what we've really excelled at is connecting our educational programs to the workforce development pipeline. So whether that's trades, whether that's the great work that SUNY Adirondack is doing locally, whether it's the great work that the Advanced Manufacturing Institute up at the northern part of my district in Clinton County is doing, those partnerships on the local level with our schools and with our employers has been critical. I also think our BOCES programs, the Warren, Saratoga, Washington, Hamilton, Essex BOCES, has been a tremendous partner. They highlight Manufacturing Day, and that's a real focus of mine on the Education and Workforce Committee, is making sure that the education that we are providing our kids at the K through 12 and higher ed level today actually connect to paying jobs in our community. And manufacturing is part of the future of the North Country. I also think there's opportunity in the sort of tech manufacturing space to grow into that space. And of course, that's the need for rural broadband and infrastructure to make sure that we have those opportunities. In the northern part of my district, we're developing an aerospace sector to partner with the transportation parts. And that's great. I think the medical device sector is a growth opportunity as well. The more healthcare manufacturing we can be doing locally, the better that is. And then I would say geopolitically, taking a step away from just the region, this has highlighted the overall economic need to have a robust domestic North American manufacturing base. I also think the implementation of USMCA both benefits the US and Canada when it comes to our manufacturing capacity. And as our largest trading partner, that is critically important to make sure that we continue to be able to make things in the US and sell them strongly in Canada and Mexico. So I think it's bright, and I want to thank all the manufacturers who are on this call for your commitment to the region and your commitment and partnerships with our local educational institutions to make sure that we have a prepared workforce to enter those jobs.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you highlighted a couple of things that we probably haven't talked about directly, but are really, really important to our ability to drive this economy in this region. And one of them is the educational institutions you talked about, particularly SUNY Adirondack, BOCES, and some of the other programs you mentioned as well. I've been all over the world, and I can tell you that I've never seen an institution as nimble and as responsive as we have here with SUNY Adirondack. Your support for SUNY Adirondack in terms of being able to help them grow in the directions that the community needs has been instrumental to that. And the combination of your support and their willingness to go where we need them to go turns them into a really remarkable asset. For instance, in the manufacturing world, you talked specifically about Manufacturing Day and preparing the workforce for the next generation of manufacturing jobs. They do a wonderful job of it. We don't talk about it a lot, but you've had a huge role in that. I want to thank you for it. We need it going forward. I know you'll continue to do it, but oftentimes I don't think people realize that it's happening, and it doesn't happen everywhere. So it's really a huge asset for us, and thank you for that. There's one last thing I wanted to touch on, and then I wanted to allow you to say anything you'd like to kind of close the session. As an organization, we've had to pivot from a remarkable asset in Ed Bartholomew. You knew Ed well, and everything I know and everything so many people in this area know about how to develop the economy comes from somebody like Ed. And it's not unlike the challenge that we face in general. We've got to turn over to a new generation of leadership. You are at the forefront of that. And we've got to figure out how to make our way for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And from an EDC perspective, we're trying to build on the shoulders of giants like Ed, but also figure out our way into the new economy. We focused on how do we take the attributes we have, the wonderful quality of life of the North Country, and make it a place where people recognize they don't just have to vacate here. They can live and work here. They can move here, and we're seeing it. It's definitely happening. We want to make sure the infrastructure and the broadband in particular is there to support that. We want to make sure that we have a healthy industry balance and that we support the industries that we have, and that of course we keep our eye on the ball with tourism. Those are all our near-term objectives, but also just this leadership transition in general is an important part. Across the North Country, this is an ongoing issue. Family-owned businesses or traditionally places where the leadership is aging out and ready to turn over to another generation. What can you share as somebody who literally is the face of this for others to take heart in the opportunity that exists here in the North Country for young people?
Well, first of all, I want to say how much of a loss Ed's unexpected passing was for so many in this community. I delivered a floor speech about Ed and just his lifetime of service to the broader Glens Falls community. It is stunning when you think about how many ways he has served his friends and neighbors. And we loved working with him on the EDC. He was an important voice. And as you talked about his important lifetime of commitment to this region, you see so many imprints of Ed everywhere you go. And we're building on really a strong basis that he has developed, and he is sorely missed. I know not just from members of the Warren County community, but beyond. Ed was widely recognized as one of the visionaries in broader upstate New York, and he is missed. And what a challenging year on top of COVID to have a loss like Ed. I know that throughout the North Country, there are bright, shining stars. We have young business owners, young people who are taking a risk and committing to opening businesses, to growing manufacturers in our region. And I think we need to work to harness that and make sure that those voices are included in organizations like the EDC, in the local chambers across the district, and other entities that are so important to the North Country. I meet them every day. I mean, whether it's farmers that are young and are first generation farmers, or whether it's some of the breweries and distilleries, or whether it's some of the retail shops, and or whether some of the really creative tourist ideas and tourist business ideas that exist locally. Harnessing them and including them is very, very important to make sure that we're renewing and reinvigorating our already strong institutions. Ed Bartholomew is irreplaceable, but I know that Ed always encouraged young people to stay committed to the region and to really think big and think creatively.
Well, thank you for that. We're kind of at the end here, but this has been of not only insightful time, but valued time to our members. It's been hard in the past year for us to take a breath, figure out not only what's happened to us, but how do we position ourselves going forward. We've been well served by you and by your team. We're grateful for that. We're grateful for your time this morning. We look forward to figuring out together how we meet all these challenges. But I want to give you the opportunity to say anything you'd like at the end. And I really want to thank you for sharing your time with us and all of the things that you have done over the last 8 years.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you to all the members of the EDC. Thank you to Matt, who had to jump. I've had the opportunity to visit with many of you in many different capacities, whether it's business tours, whether it's sit-down roundtables, and I am committed to continuing to serve this district to the very best of my ability. I highlighted the work we have to do before the end of the year. Do not hesitate to reach out to my office. We are here to help. We focus on these really granular constituent services, whether it's help for Glens Falls Hospital or whether it's identifying grant funding for the region. We are going to continue to be a partner to our EDC, but also to the local businesses. I know this has been just an unprecedented, challenging year in so many ways, both from the business perspective, but just general way of life with your family, not being able to see your friends or your elderly relatives. Thank you so much for the resilience that the North Country has shown and just the tremendous dedication to getting through this together. I'm very grateful, and do not hesitate to reach out to my office right in Glens Falls. Jacob is on this call and he can follow up with any of you, or you can reach out directly to me. So thank you, Jim, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I wish everyone a happy holidays.
Thank you again, Representative Stefanik. You shared a great deal with us this morning. We're going to make it available to our hundreds of members, those that were not able to join us. And of course, I know they will continue to reach out to you as they need, but you've been gracious this morning. We wish you the very best as you sprint to the finish here in the rest of the year and into your new term. Thank you again.